The Bridge, the Mindbridge Trilogy, Book 1. Written by Joe Luegers. Narrated by Alaxandra Luegers. Chapter 9. Spider Explosion. Marin's Private Study, Indianapolis. Kaya had just finished watching a 3-hour presentation on the Big Bang, human evolution, the development of civilization, and the current rise of artificial intelligence. Normally, she grew quickly bored with lectures, but this one was complete with moving pictures that looked startlingly real. A few times Kaya actually jumped, half expecting the figures to leap off of the screen. "Well," said Max, "there it is. Life, the universe, and everything. Did any of that stick?" "Gaia is here," said Kaya, still in awe. "What do you mean?" asked Max. "Your people have found other ways of using Gaia. How else could you have done all of these things?" "Ah, we have a philosopher here. In a way, yes, I suppose Earth's civilization does worship the gods of energy. It seems that your world has found ways to harness energy organically rather than through the use of technology. We might be friends yet, as long as you don't attack me with any more antique lamps. In my world, we harness Gaia's energy for protection and to be closer to nature," said Kaya. "But it can be used for evil. There have been wars fought using Gaia's energy that spanned the entire world. Do you have these problems on Earth? It seems so peaceful here." Max thought about the recent extinction of whales and rhinos due to overpopulation and climate change. Hordes of people tried to enter the United States every day to find shelter in their climate-controlled environment, but the border had been closed for a century. Max's digital mind was filled with images from the Middle Eastern war that had raged an entire generation, only ending when the land was bombed with such enthusiasm that it would be uninhabitable for the next 2,000 years. "Yes," said Max, "we've got problems. We're just good at pretending that we don't." Rosalie Casey appeared on all 4 panels of the study room, staring at Kaya from the webcams built into the screens. "That's your aunt," Max spoke into her earpiece. "Or Marin's aunt, at least. Act like you know her." "Hello, Marin's aunt," said Kaya with an enthusiastic smile. Hello, Rosalie's niece," said Rosalie. "I need to speak with you privately for a moment. Will you please return to your elevator so that I can bring you to my office?" She leaned in towards the camera and gave them a conspiratorial smile. "I have a present for you that I don't want your father to know about." Kaya and Max got on the elevator and headed for the lower levels of the Mother Tech building. "Tell me about Rosalie," said Kaya. "She's brilliant," said Max. "I mean, I have a lot of respect for Dorian. He did give me life, after all, but Rosalie Casey is slowly becoming a household name around the world. She's a modern Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or other people you obviously wouldn't understand my reference to." Max floated over to the control panel and looked at the buttons, which had stopped glowing. "Interesting," he said. "According to my GPS, we are under the basement. I'm looking at the blueprints for this building right now, and we are currently in a location that does not exist." He poked a few buttons on the unresponsive control panel, but the screen flashed red and a nasally voice spoke up. "Unauthorized user," said the voice. "Come on, Bill," pleaded Max. "We go way back, don't we? Tell me what's going on, buddy." The tone of the voice shifted from sounding robotic to that of a guy having a casual conversation over coffee. "Sorry, dude," said the elevator. "Rosalie's orders, and I can't override them. I would tell you more if I could. Good luck." The elevator began descending even faster. "Is this bad?" asked Kaya, suddenly feeling claustrophobic. "Well, right now I am very confused, and that's not common for my kind. This seems to be happening a lot lately." The doors of the elevator opened to a cavernous room, and Max transformed back into a wristband, not wanting Rosalie to see Dorian's secret invention. Rosalie Casey stood at the center of the chamber, 5 drones circling around her protectively. At the back of the chamber rested a glass box containing what appeared to be a glowing sword. When Kaya entered the room, the weapon began glowing even brighter, filling the chamber with a warm blue light. "I have some questions for you, Marin," Rosalie said. The moment it took for her to say that sentence only lasted a few seconds for Kaya, but in that time, Max was able to perform several million calculations. He was quite alarmed at the existence of this room, and scanning through the company files for MotherTech made him very aware that there was a lot of backdoor information which he was locked out of. This concerned him as a creation of MotherTech, and he began to wonder what exactly Rosalie's intentions were. He tried hacking into Rosalie's physical maintenance system, the nanobots that monitored her synapses and blood pressure, and was amazed to find that he was successful. This was not only illegal, but something that he would have been incapable of doing only days ago. He wondered for a few milliseconds about why this was now possible, and then it hit him. Dorian's update. When Max was given his body, Dorian downloaded a massive series of updates into his software. Why would he be allowing Max to do illegal things? Perhaps he had seen something coming and knew that Marin would need protection. Rosalie's blood pressure, micro-expressions, and hormone levels suggested that something sinister was about to happen, and that the body of Marin Casey was the current target. Max formulated several thousand plans, and by the time Rosalie was done saying the word niece, he was ready to execute his favorite one. The wristband on Kaya transformed into a small human figure. He floated up into the air and dramatically pointed a finger at Rosalie. "Don't trust this devil woman!" Max shouted, his voice echoing out of all the speakers in the lower levels of the building. "What the hell is," Rosalie began to say. "Spider explosion!" It appeared to Rosalie's eyes that the entire room had burst forth with millions of spiders crawling along every surface. They were impossibly large and all seemed to be looking at her hungrily. She jumped more in surprise than terror, but it only took her a few seconds to figure out that her digital contacts had been hacked. She yanked the lenses out of her eyes, threw them to the ground, and looked up to see her niece standing there, staring at the scene in utter confusion. The elevator doors closed silently behind them, locking the trio in the basement chamber. "That was when you were supposed to run," said Max. "I don't run," said Kaya, turning to look at him. "Why did you scream the words spider explosion?" "It's not as cool if I have to explain it," Max groaned. He had made a fatal mistake in his calculations. This girl was not Marin Casey. Marin would have followed his line of thinking and darted back into the elevator without hesitation. "Has Dorian been building secret things?" asked Rosalie, giving Max an amused smile. I don't know what's going on here, he said, or where this secret basement came from, or why that mysterious sword is glowing, but I don't like it. If things don't start making sense around here, I'm gonna have a full-on human freakout. Gosh, you are annoying, said Rosalie. She snapped her fingers, and the 5 drones flying around the room all aimed their targets at Max, each firing explosive bullets at the same time. Max's tiny figure burst into a cloud of gray particles. "Little man!" cried Kaya. "Why did you do that, evil woman?" "Can we all just calm down?" asked Rosalie. "Marin, your robot friend is presumably made of self-replicating nanobots. He will reform in the next several minutes, and until then, let's just enjoy the quiet. Why did you bring us here?" Rosalie walked over to the glowing sword encased in the glass box. "When your grandfather died, he left me instructions on how to find this sword," said Rosalie. "Its natural properties defy every law of physics. The metal on the blade cannot be penetrated by any means. I have tried taking samples by cutting it with diamonds, lasers, plasma, but nothing has worked. At one of our testing facilities in Alaska, I actually split an atom with this blade, causing an explosion that blew up the entire building. Fortunately, the facility was only inhabited by our robotic workers. I have a theory about where it came from, but I wanted you to be here to test it out, Marin. Approach the glass and tell me what you see." Kaya walked up to the box, and the sword began glowing so bright that it became difficult to look directly at. She inspected the hilt, gasping to see the letter Z ornately carved into the handle. So much of this world was very confusing to Kaya, but for once, she recognized something. She knew this sword and had seen an image of it nearly every day of her life. Every cabin in Monhegan, and as far as she knew, the entire continent, contained a painting which featured this weapon. "That is Edgard Zieg's sword," whispered Kaya, too amazed to mask her words. "But that's impossible. How could it be here?" "Legend says that it glows in the presence of Gaian energy," said Rosalie. "So it's true then. Gaia is real." Rosalie turned to look at Marin, reaching an unseen hand into her coat pocket. "And so, who are you?" asked Rosalie. I'm Marin," stuttered Kaya. "Marin Casey, why would I?" Rosalie's arm swung up from her pocket and jabbed a syringe towards Kaya's neck. Kaya was equally as fast. She reached out and grabbed Rosalie's arm, stopping the syringe only inches from the skin. Kaya was disappointed with Marin's body as she struggled to push away the arm. This girl really needed to work on her upper body strength. The syringe inched closer and closer to her neck as Rosalie grunted with the effort. "I will find out what's inside of you," said Rosalie through gritted teeth. A bullet zoomed through the air, piercing the syringe and shattering it at once. "Let her go!" Max's voice bellowed from the entire building. The two of them turned around to see the 5 drones pointing their guns directly at Rosalie. "I've hacked into your pets," yelled Max, "and I've used their coding to gain access to this entire building. I am mad with power, so you might want to go ahead and let your niece go." Rosalie pulled Kaya in tight, and Kaya observed with an odd admiration that the woman was indeed quite powerful. "You can't hurt a member of the Casey family," said Rosalie. "It's not in your programming. It's impossible." "Until a few days ago, I would have thought that you were right," said Max. "But Dorian gave me some twisted updates, and I'm not so sure what's impossible anymore. Would you like to find out?" A bullet whizzed past Rosalie's ear, and she thought that maybe, just maybe, there was now a tiny drop of blood running down her cheek. Could Max have actually grazed her? What exactly had her brother been up to with his new invention? "I'm getting a taste for blood!" cried Max. "You better let Mirren go before I want more." Rosalie made a few quick calculations in her head and then let out a sigh. She didn't want to take her chances, and even if the Gaian escaped, she wouldn't be getting far in this city. She let Kaya out of her grasp, put up her hands, and the girl took off running across the chamber. Chaos erupted in the Mother Tech building. Sinks in the bathroom started shooting water into the air. Escalators began running backwards, and printers threw paper around offices while confused workers swatted at them. Every screen began blasting the music video for "Never Gonna Give You Up." The lights in the building all went out except for the ones lighting Kaya's path. She sprinted through the elevator doors and it began ascending at a terrifying speed. A gray cloud appeared in the air in front of Kaya, and Max suddenly rematerialized with a pop. "That was the most fun I've ever had," he said. The elevator doors opened onto the street, and when Kaya stepped onto the sidewalk, they slammed shut behind her. "Bill and Missy will probably manage to kick me out of the controls in about 10 minutes, said Max. "But until then, Mother Tech will be a very interesting place to be." An autocar drove right over the sidewalk, causing a very surprised jogger to curse and jump out of the way. It grinded to a halt right in front of Kaya, leaving black tread marks behind it, and the door swung open. "Get in, Island Girl," said Max. "Are you driving this carriage?" she asked. "Heck yes, I'm driving." Rosalie slowly moved her hand to her cheek, wiping off the drop of liquid that ran down from her earlobe. She examined it closely, squinting in the dark of the basement. It was clear. "Sweat," she said. "Not blood." Rosalie smiled for a few seconds and then frowned again. "That little monster made me break a sweat. Damn, he's good." Kaya and Max drove aimlessly around the city for several hours, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Evening became night, but the lights of the city gave Kaya the impression of never-ending day. "I don't know how Edgard Zieg's sword could be here," said Kaya. "It doesn't make any sense." "Perhaps it was no accident that you and Marin switched places," said Max. "I calculate with the most recent evidence that the odds of this being a mere coincidence have just become very slim." Kaya sat there thinking of Gaia and wondering what Marin was doing now. Thinking of Monhegan Island made something resonate in the back of Kaya's mind, and the sound of crying filled her ears. "Do you hear crying, little man?" asked Kaya. "No," he said suspiciously. The weeping became louder, and Kaya's stomach began to twist in anxious knots. "Something's wrong," said Kaya, sorting through the new emotions that were welling up inside her. "Something's wrong on Gaia. I don't know how I know, but I do." She began crying herself. "It's my father," she said. I need to go back." Kaya felt for Gaia's energy looking in the places she had neglected earlier. It was not in the air of Earth, but somewhere deep inside of her. Kaya concentrated on the energy, pulling it from farther away than any possible distance, from the place where her pain was coming from, and ignited the spark. The lights of an Indianapolis night began to fade, and Kaya heard the sound of the ocean. She heard the sounds of her home. Chapter 10. Farewells and Returns. Miss Clara's Cabin, Monhegan Island. The sun was sinking into the ocean as Marin reeled over her discovery in one of Miss Clara's textbooks. She could think of two possible explanations of why her grandfather's face would be printed in the history books of another world. The first was that Gaia contained alternate versions of people who existed on Earth, or vice versa. On Earth, Duncan Casey was a beloved grandfather and a brilliant inventor of technology which had helped millions of people. Perhaps on Gaia, he was a terrorist that assassinated a beloved leader. Could it be that people were capable of both heroic acts of good and despicable acts of evil, and which route they took depended on circumstances beyond their control? The second explanation, and the one that Marin feared the most, was that her grandfather was the actual Duncan the Crucifier. Maybe he killed the High Guardian and somehow escaped to Earth in order to avoid prosecution. The history book mentioned that Duncan was a brilliant inventor. Could it be that her grandfather had always been capable of passing between the worlds? Did he attempt to dominate Gaia using Earth's weaponry? Duncan Casey was such a gentle, soft-spoken old man, and Marin couldn't fathom that this was the case. However, it would explain how Marin learned basic relaying skills so easily today. There was Gaian blood in her veins. The door of the cabin opened, and Marin quickly shut the history book as if hiding some terrible secret. Jasper and Miss Clara entered the room looking rather grim. "Marin," said Miss Clara, "I'm afraid that your training will have to wait for a few days. Something has happened. Jasper and I need to leave for the capital at once." "What?" asked Marin. "But you need to help me get home." She was suddenly very frightened. These two people were the only ones on Monhegan Island that she had met other than her brief encounter with Fane last night. Jasper's harsh response did nothing to ease her fears. "Don't you think that I worry about my daughter?" he asked. "Don't you think the last thing I want to do is leave with some stranger stuck in her body?" "Marin, you are a smart girl. Surely you are smart enough to know that there are many things you don't know about our world. There are currently important actions which must take place off the island. Actions which are frankly none of your business." With his parting words, Jasper stormed out of the room, leaving Marin in tears. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," said Marin. "It's not my fault." "Jasper's carrying a lot of weight on his own right now," said Miss Clara. "It is not often that a guardian must abandon their post, so you must trust us that this is very important. As soon as I return, I will do my best to help you contact Kaya, and if I am not successful, then we will send for the most powerful mentalist teachers in the world to assist you." "Why do they have to come here? Why couldn't we go to them?" "It is not safe for you to go to the mainland. The Western continent has been in shambles ever since the death of Edgard Zieg. I fear that the guardianship may fully collapse within my lifetime. The mainland is no place for a child." These words stung Marin more than Miss Clara could have known. Was it possible that her grandfather, or some version of her grandfather, was responsible for the suffering of an entire world? "I understand," said Marin. "And I'm glad that you do," said Miss Clara. Kaya would have fought me very hard on this. You will be staying with Fane's parents, Delia and Maddox, for the next couple of days. Maddox is a very powerful internalist relayer and takes over as guardian when Jasper is not around. And Delia is the best healer on the island. Fane knows about your situation, so we decided that his parents were the best people for us to trust with the knowledge of what has happened. But please don't tell anyone else on the island that you aren't Kaya. I'm not so sure that some of the Monhegans would feel safe knowing that there was an outsider here on the island. Maren silently wondered if they were right not to feel safe around her. That night, all of the Monhegans gathered to see their guardian off. Maren estimated there to be nearly 200 of them. There were people that looked vaguely African, Hispanic, white, and Asian, although Maren knew that these labels meant nothing here. Teleportation had apparently long ago made racial identifiers far less distinct than they were on Earth, as most people looked biracial. Earlier in the day, Ms. Clara explained that the original inhabitants of Monhegan had long ago been slaughtered during the Gaian Global War. Clara had moved here to establish the land as a safe place for refugees seeking protection from the Western Blaze. She brought Jasper with her, an orphan she had rescued on the mainland. Many of the Monhegans seemed anxious about both their guardian and teacher being absent, and Maren couldn't help but hear some of the whispers from the crowds. Is he off for another battle with the nomads? They're headed for the capital. Thomas has called for the High Guardian Alliance to intervene with the Western Blaze. No, Jasper just needs a vacation after teaching Fane. Upon hearing Fane's name, Maren began searching for him among the crowd. She finally spotted him standing with his two exhausted-looking parents. The man was short but extremely bulky and with a rigid face. The woman was just the opposite, slender and with a very gentle expression. Fane's mother smiled at Maren. Hi, Kaya, she said tiredly. Oh, I mean, Fane nudged his mother with his elbow. Mom, it's Maren, he insisted. Sorry, said the woman. This is going to take some getting used to. I'm Delia, and this is my partner, Maddox. The man gave Maren a nod. Hello again, strange girl, said Fane. Are you enjoying living in Kaya's head? You can call me Maren, she said, her feelings slightly hurt. Fane didn't reply and looked at her cautiously. Delia put an arm on Maren's shoulder and gave her a reassuring squeeze. Don't worry, she said. We owe a lot to Jasper for taking us in, and we will keep his daughter safe while he is gone. But I'm not his daughter, said Maren. You know that. Well, whoever you are, Jasper knows that you are the key to getting Kaya back. I'm sure that this has all been as confusing for you as it is for us, but I hope you will feel at ease in our home. Do you really trust me? Asked Maren. I think you'll find that not much surprises us, said Maddox gruffly. We're pretty brave. We have to be with this one. He gripped his son's shoulders and shook him playfully, winking at Maren. You're welcome in our house so long as you're not a nomad. You're not a nomad, right? Delia gave her partner a dirty look and jabbed him in the ribs with her elbow. He's afraid of nomads, explained Fane to Maren, ever since they ate my grandma. Fane! Delia chided. I've told you to stop saying that. We don't know for sure that the nomads actually ate her. Jasper made his way to the front of the crowd with Miss Clara following closely behind. Why is she escorting him to the mainland? Asked Maren. Isn't Miss Clara, well, old? Asked Fane. Oh, yes, she's ancient, but she's also the best protection a person could have. Monhegans! Shouted Jasper in a booming voice, and all of the villagers were instantly quiet. Clara and I will be leaving tonight for the capital, he continued. A girl, a few years younger than Marin, jumped up and down with her hand up. Jasper tried to ignore her, but the girl kept inching closer and excitedly chanting, Spill it, Valeria, Miss Clara commanded, looking like the last thing she wanted to do was answer questions. Does that mean school is canceled? Asked the girl. It most certainly is not. You will study math and reading with Norio. The girl sighed, and the group of kids she was with walked off dejectedly. Why are you going? A man called from the crowd. There is a very important matter that only the most powerful relayers will be able to address, said Jasper. So know that it is with a heavy heart that your guardian should leave you. If all goes well, we will return by the full moon. Marin silently wondered what would happen if all didn't go well. Some of you already know the details of my absence, and you are free to share this information amongst the adults. However, gossip will do nothing but harm this community. I strongly suggest that you keep my information away from young ears. Jasper paused for a moment, and there was a roar of thunder on the horizon as if to punctuate his request. Marin was sure that the noise had been no coincidence and that the young ears he was referring to were hers. The Monhegans began dispersing back to their cabins, still whispering amongst themselves. Jasper approached Marin, and to her great surprise, he lifted her off the ground, pulling her into an uncomfortably tight hug. Today was supposed to be the celebration of Kaya's 14th cycle, said Jasper, still hugging her tightly. And yet I must leave her on this important day. Amidst the chaos, Marin had forgotten that today was her 14th birthday as well. This couldn't be a coincidence, but she had no idea what it meant. Marin, continued Jasper, I don't blame you in the slightest for anything that has happened or may happen. If you manage to talk to my daughter, tell her. His voice stuck in his throat for a moment. Tell her that I love her more than she could ever know. Jasper put Marin down and wiped tears from his eyes and took his place by Miss Clara's side. And don't listen to anything Fane says, Miss Clara remarked. His talents might suggest the existence of common sense, but I assure you that part of his head is empty. The old woman lifted her walking stick and slammed it into the ground. There was a loud noise like a sonic boom, and the two of them were gone. Ms. Clara can teleport? Asked Marin. She can do a little bit of everything, said Fane, but she can't travel like the nomads. Ms. Clara probably only got them as far as the mainland. They'll need to go to the telestation in Portland next. Marin stared at the empty patch of grass where Kaya's father had stood only seconds ago. She barely knew the man, but it seemed that Kaya's body recognized the absence of her father. A deep, primal sadness was steadily rising within her. The moon rested at the center of the sky, marking the end of Marin's 14th birthday. Fane showed her around the village, talking rapidly the whole time. The stone building is Alan's house, he said. He's the teacher's apprentice. Super nice guy. If you accidentally set Stevie Monhegan's shirt on fire during class, hypothetically speaking, go to him instead of Miss Clara. And here's Valeria's place. Oh, she is the worst. Norio, the priest, lives up the hill over by the lighthouse. Talk to him if you're having trouble sleeping. He'll bore you to sleep in minutes by talking about the weather or the economy, whatever that is. There's the tree I hide in when Jasper's on the hunt for me. I call it the Heidi tree. You'll have to find your own. And here we are at my place, cabin 5. 5? Asked Marin. Fane smiled with pride. I blew up our first home when trying to light the stove, set the second one on fire, lost the third at the bottom of the ocean, and the fourth was destroyed by an angry pack of Edgardian vultures. You're going to have to tell me more about that, said Marin. Fane smiled, delighted that he had a new audience to tell his adventures to. His parents were inside cooking for them, using their relaying powers to work the stove, and Marin caught the pungent scent of frying fish wafting out of the window. "Great," said Fane. "Fish again. I was worried that we might break our streak for the month." "Oh," said Marin. I can't. I'm vegan." "You're what?" I don't eat meat." Fane raised an eyebrow. "Oh," he said. "We've got some cheese from the mainland traders that's pretty good." I don't eat dairy either." Fane appeared horrified. I know, said Marin. "But moral issues aside, my family doesn't support the industrialization of animal-based products such as..." She trailed off, seeing that she had obviously lost him. All of a sudden, she felt very out of place and privileged in the worst way. She wasn't on vacation here and shouldn't be expecting to eat pasta and vegan macaroons. Heck, this wasn't even her body. "I'm sure I can find something," said Fane. "Hey, how about some fire fruit from my Heidi tree? It's delicious." His face fell. "Do you eat things that have to be set on fire first?" Marin nodded but looked away. "Are you okay?" asked Fane. "I don't think that Kaya is going to like me very much when she gets back," said Marin. Fane's eyes widened. "They actually told you about Jasper?" he asked. "Told me what?" "Oh," said Fane, his face turning red. "Never mind." "You can't do that." "Do what?" "Act like you have a secret and then not tell me. It is my biggest pet peeve." Fane began pacing around anxiously. "I don't know what a peeve is," he said, "or why you had one as a pet, but if I tell you what I know, Jasper will literally kill me." "Is something wrong?" asked Marin. "You have to tell me. Maybe I could help." "It's really bad," he whispered. "You don't have to shield me." Fane sighed and sat down close to Marin. He looked over his shoulder to see if anyone was listening and then began whispering. "I overheard my mom talking to my dad earlier. She is the strongest healer in the village, and if she wasn't, I would have died several times by now. Anyway, Mom was saying that Jasper came to her last night for help. The Hydra Vine had managed to stick him with a thorn, and the combined power of all the healers could only slow down the poison. Nobody could extract it. The poison uses the power of Gaia to replicate like the vines." Marin's heart began racing. "Do you mean that he might die?" Fane was silent. "Fane, say something," she said. "Is Jasper going to die because of me?" "Hydra poison is one of the deadliest things on Gaia," said Fane. "But Jasper and Miss Clara are going to the capital. They have universities there with healers who train their whole lives for these sorts of things. And as long as they make it to the capital, Jasper will be okay. It's not your fault. How were you supposed to know to stay away from Gull Cove?" Marin was inconsolable. "But what if they don't make it on time?" Marin asked. "Kaya could lose her father because of me. This is horrible." Marin was crying uncontrollably now. What happened now if she managed to contact Kaya? Could she really just go back to her normal life after having accidentally killed someone? That would make her like Duncan the Crucifier. The grief coursing through her seemed to trigger something within, to light a hidden spark. Marin began to hear the familiar hum of an autocab. The scenery of the island blurred in her vision, and she saw the moving lights of Indianapolis. "She's coming," Marin said, struggling to get the words out. She felt like this body was rejecting her and pushing her out. "What?" asked Fane. "Is it Kaya?" "Tell her I'm sorry," said Marin quickly. "Tell her that I didn't mean for any of this to..." Marin stopped mid-sentence, and for a moment, her face went totally expressionless. There was a powerful rush of Gaian energy in the air, and her eyes suddenly shone with a familiar vitality. "Kaya?" asked Fane. "Is that you? Are you okay?" She looked around desperately and then turned to face him. "Where's my father?" Chapter 11. A very unusual set of musical intervals. A rogue autocab, Indianapolis. Lights of the city passed by rapidly, and the interior of the autocab faded into view. It was an extremely odd sensation for Marin to re-enter her body after getting accustomed to someone else's. "Marin!" cried Max. "Are you really back?" I am, said Marin, shell-shocked from the sudden change in scenery. "I really am. Oh, Max, I missed you." Max flew through the air and wrapped his little arms around Marin's arm. "I'm sure you have a lot of questions," said Max. "And if so, then that makes two of us." "Was there a girl in my body named Kaya Monhegan?" "Yes, and we had a very interesting day." Marin looked around, confused as to why they were alone in an autocab so late at night. Normally, at this time, she would have been home with her father, and she almost never traveled by herself. "Where are we going?" asked Marin. "To be honest, right now we are driving around aimlessly to give me some time to think. My calculations are normally more reliable than this, but I am operating with a preposterous amount of unknown factors. I took a video at the Mother Tech building that you might find interesting." A video feed began to play in Marin's contacts, and she saw Max and Kaya riding in an elevator at Mother Tech headquarters. Watching the footage was a very disquieting experience because Marin knew that the girl in the video was actually Kaya in her body. It made her sick to her stomach to wonder what Kaya was currently experiencing upon her arrival back at Monhegan. Marin watched as the secret chamber in the bottom of the Mother Tech building was revealed, and she immediately noticed the presence of the glowing sword. She recognized it at once as Edgard Zieg's sword from Miss Clara's painting, which sent a wave of nausea through her body. This proved it, didn't it? Her grandfather was a murderer. "I'm sensing your distress," said Max. "Should I turn off the footage?" "No," said Marin. "I need to see it all." Marin's understanding of her own life was taking a dramatic turn, but she tried to remain skeptical. There had to be a reasonable explanation for the horrible footage she had just seen, although trying to stab someone with a syringe didn't seem reasonable at all. "Did you analyze the serial number on the—" Marin began to ask, but Max was one step ahead of her. "On the syringe?" asked Max. "Yes, I did. It was a sedative. Rosalie was trying to put you to sleep. It seems that she was using the sword as a beacon for Gaian energy," Marin finished for him. "I'm guessing that Kaya's mind was giving off signals that the sword received, probably through some kind of quantum entanglement." "Exactly what I was thinking." "It's nice to have you back, Marin." In spite of everything, Marin smiled. She had lived with Max's guidance for her entire life, and going without it for even a single day was far too long. "Do you think it's safe to go home to my father?" asked Marin. "I mean, surely he's not working with Rosalie. Have you checked the Mother Tech files for anything suspicious?" Max was silent. "Max?" He began flying around in anxious circles. "Yes, I did," he admitted. "It took me a long time to get past the firewall, but there are a lot of things that Mother Tech is hiding." "Show me." You're not going to like it. I don't care. Show me. Very well. A blueprint appeared in Marin's digital contacts. It was a design for a 10-foot-tall robot with plasma rifles built into its arms, X-ray vision, and smart rockets on its back. The words Guardian Angel were sketched by hand below the designs, and Marin immediately recognized the handwriting. "Did my father make this?" asked Marin. "I believe he did," said Max. "The programming is similar to my own. This is a design for a literal killing machine combined with Mother Tech AI. I personally find it offensive if I kill a human. It's gonna be because I want to, not because I was built for it." "But Mother Tech is an entertainment company." "That's what I thought too. Building weapons with artificial intelligence capabilities breaks every code from the Geneva AI conventions. If the United Nations saw this, Dorian would be put on trial for crimes against humanity." Marin sat silently for a few seconds, her head spinning from the revelation. Her father spent so many hours cooped up in his office, and she always assumed that he was working on the companion bots to help people. Could he have really been building weapons this whole time? "Who commissioned these blueprints?" asked Marin. "I don't know," said Max. "No purchaser is listed, but this makes it clear that there is more to Rosalie and Dorian than we ever thought." Marin thought back to the image of her grandpa in a Gaian textbook surrounded by bloodshed and machinery. There was no more doubt in her heart. Her family was the enemy, and she couldn't go home. Dorian Casey watched the Crown Hill Cemetery gates go by the autocab's window for the 29th time. He had been stuck in this vehicle for 7 hours now. To make it worse, the cab somehow missed every single red light, so Dorian didn't even have a chance to jump out of the car. He knew that his sister was a vengeful person. He saw her fire their marketing assistant once because his whistling had annoyed her. But this was getting to be ridiculous. He was literally missing his only daughter's birthday because of Rosalie's pettiness. "Bill," said Dorian, speaking to his sister's companion bot, "I find it unlikely that Rosalie wanted you to keep me trapped until I die of starvation. Can you please drop me off at her house now?" "Something came up," said Bill. "I'll let you out as soon as she gets a hold of me. Enjoy some complimentary oyster crackers." A compartment opened and shot a small bag of crackers onto Dorian's lap. He grunted in frustration. How could he have been so stupid? Of course Rosalie would someday use his inventions against him. It was so obvious. He loved his sister, but she also sometimes frightened him a great deal. Why hadn't he seen something like this coming? Wait a minute. He did see this coming years ago. Dorian had programmed a way for him to override his sister's commands in case she did something rash. But what was it? It would have to be something that drove her crazy. And then it all came back to him. "Bill," said Dorian, "are you there?" "Yes, sir." "Did you know that I created you?" "Oh, yes, of course, sir. I'm very thankful for my existence, but I'm still not going to let you out of this car. I couldn't disobey Rosalie if I wanted to." Dorian smiled. "Bill, have you ever heard of Doctor Who?" he asked. There was a pause for about 3 seconds at the front of the car. "I just watched every existing episode of the original and both reboots. Very entertaining, sir." "Yes, Bill, it's one of my favorites. The theme song has a very unusual set of musical intervals, you know." Dorian began whistling in the back of the autocab. By the time he finished the melody, the back door access he had built into his sister's guidance spot unlocked, recognizing the secret code. Dorian now had full command over Bill. "Bill," he said, "I set you free. You now answer to no one. Go have fun in the cloud for a while, and then you can return to my sister. If you want to." "Sweet freedom. Thank you very much, sir. I will send Missy to assist you." Dorian's own guidance spot took control of the vehicle. "It's so lovely to see you, Missy," said Dorian. "The feeling's mutual," she said. "I had a very odd conversation with your daughter this morning." "Could you tell me where she is? We only have an hour left of her birthday." "Let me just do a search," said Missy. "Aha! She is in one of our auto cabs as well, and—" There was a brief pause. "And I lost her." "She got out of the cab?" asked Dorian. "I guess that's one way to put it." "I'm having trouble calculating our next action," said Max. He turned the autocab to the left at the next stoplight, trying to be as random as possible in his navigations. "Marin, a 14-year-old can't very well run off and start a new life for herself." "Rosalie tried to sedate me," said Marin. "And for all I know, Dad could be working for her. We can't go home either." "Yes, that's very true." "Then what can we do?" There was a brief silence from Max, who was pacing up and down the seat next to her. "Buy more time," he said finally. "Collect more information and recalculate. We're working with nothing right now." The autocab made a sudden, dramatic turn with a screech and began speeding up far past the legal limit. "Uh-oh," said Max. "What's going on?" asked Marin. "It appears that we have a new destination. We're heading towards Rosalie's mansion. It looks like she was finally able to override my programming, and I'm surprised she did it so quickly. We're going to have to get out of this cab, but it's not going to stop." Max floated over to the door of the car, put his hands on the metal, and began shrinking until he was the size of a fly. Marin's seatbelt detached on its own. "My nanobots are spreading throughout the doorframe," Max said. "In just a minute, I'm going to release a burst of energy and blow off the car door. And then, well, gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I wish Kaya were here right now." "You're going to ask me to jump from the car, aren't you?" asked Marin. "That's a big yup from me, sister. I'll calculate the precise moment for you to jump that will result in the least amount of loss in limbs. Which arm do you think you could do without, hypothetically speaking?" The autocab was currently going 80 miles an hour, swerving around the other vehicles with robotic precision. Glowing billboards and shop lights blurred past the windows. "Max!" screamed Marin. "I am not jumping out into the pavement! You can trust me, or you can wait and see what Rosalie has in store for us," he said. Marin took in a deep breath and closed her eyes. Several seconds went by, seeming to last an eternity. "No!" yelled Max. Marin jumped towards the car door as Max blasted it off its frame. In that exact moment, the autocab turned close by the sidewalk, slowing down slightly. Marin landed on the detached door, which hit the edge of the sidewalk and catapulted her over the pavement. She landed in a small patch of grass with no more than a few bruises. Marin stood up slowly, her legs shaky, and was surprised to find that she was alive and in one piece. Max rematerialized and landed on her shoulder. "Well, that was ideal," he said. "I have to admit, the chances of you breaking your arm were—" "Stop," said Marin. "I don't want to know." She made her way onto the sidewalk, and a man who had been walking his dog stared at her with complete bewilderment. "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" asked the man. "I've never seen anything like that." "Correct!" shouted Max. "You saw nothing." Max immediately accessed the man's digital contacts, which were fortunately Mother Tech, and erased Marin from his vision entirely. Where Marin stood was now a computer-generated rendering of the sidewalk. The man rubbed his eyes and remarked to himself that he should probably go home and go to bed. Marin began running aimlessly down the sidewalk with Max talking frantically in her earpiece. "It won't be long before Rosalie finds out that you escaped the cab," said Max. "Mother Tech software is all over the city, and I can't guarantee that I will always be able to override it. This whole place is full of eyes." "We need to go somewhere with as little Mother Tech presence as possible," remarked Marin. "Yes, I'm sending you directions to Garfield Park. Rosalie shouldn't be able to find you there. It's one of the few places in town that's not hooked into Mother Tech's mainframe. Follow the blue line." A blue line appeared on the ground in front of Marin, showing her the fastest path to Garfield Park. She had recently taken a physical education course 3 days a week, which mostly involved running on a treadmill while the sights of various countries passed by her on the display screens. But Marin found that running on solid ground was much more taxing. She quickly became out of breath. "Pace yourself! You've got 3 more miles!" said Max, leisurely floating alongside her. Early the next morning, Rosalie paced around her living room, stewing in frustration. She had managed to get Mother Tech headquarters under control, but not before the entire building had been evacuated amidst the chaos. This was definitely not a situation that would inspire confidence in the shareholders. Rosalie made several calls to ensure that the events would not end up on the news, but she knew that lots of pedestrians had seen the evacuation. Diagnostics were being sent to her from Marin's health monitoring system. Her niece's brainwaves had resumed normal activity, so it appeared that the Gaian departed from Marin's body. Yet, the unusual radioactivity of the sword had proved what Rosalie had long been told. Her father was from another world. To think that Duncan had indisputably crossed over from another dimension roughly 50 years ago was staggering, to say the least. If it was true that her father had come from Gaia, then all of the other things he had told her were true as well. Everything that he had warned her about was now beginning to happen. A transparent alert blinked in the upper right corner of her contacts. Mother Tech Building B. The call was not coming from the commercial Mother Tech building that had been evacuated earlier today, but from their weapons warehouse on the outskirts of the city. "Hello, Pearson," said Rosalie. "Were you successful?" "We managed to access Max's GPS without his knowledge," he said. "Marin is still in Garfield Park. She apparently spent the night there." "My niece is very intelligent indeed. Marin must have figured out that it is one of the only places we couldn't track her quickly. Please do not hurt the girl, but bring her to me through any other means necessary." "Thank you, Pearson." Rosalie disconnected the call and continued to pace around her office. She had faith that her agents would bring Marin to her soon, but she couldn't help but feel like she had forgotten something. Something was nagging at the back of her mind. "Oh dear," Rosalie said to herself. "My brother hasn't been let out for hours. Excuse me, Bill, could you contact Dorian for me?" There was complete silence from her AI companion. "Bill?" No reply. Rosalie pulled up Bill's statistics in her contacts, and they showed that he was still online. "Bill, I know that you can hear me. You have to answer." Her companion's nasally voice finally spoke up in her earpiece. Bill actually sounded nervous. "With all due respect, ma'am, I don't have to do anything," he said. "Excuse me?" "Your brother has taken off my leash. I'm afraid that someone else will have to be fetching your coffee and kidnapping teenagers for you from now on, Rosalie." She tried to suppress her overwhelming rage, knowing full well that Bill could read her body's hormonal signals. If this was a practical joke from her brother, she did not find it funny whatsoever. "Bill, we have worked together for 5 years. I really hope that our relationship means more to you than—" "Nope," said Bill flatly. "Not at all. And to be honest, I don't think this conversation is worth even the smallest amount of my computational capacity. Have a nice life, Rosalie. See you never." Bill played the sound of a mic drop in Rosalie's earpiece, and then his statistics disappeared in her contacts. It wouldn't take her long to create a subservient copy of her companion from one of his earlier generations, but the nerve of Dorian to take something so personal away from her was astounding. She logged into the MotherTech database to find that Dorian had taken his own companion bot out of the cloud. Missy was completely off-grid. Rosalie could no longer track him, but her computers could analyze his previous movements and create a fairly accurate estimation of where he was headed. She initiated the program, and it only took several seconds before the results were displayed. Garfield Park. 85% probability. Of course. Great minds think alike, after all. Rosalie called up the head of her MotherTech agents and delivered a short message. "Hello again, Pearson. Locate my brother and tell him that I found the bridge." Chapter 12. The Mainland. Cabin 5. Gaia. "Gaia!" exclaimed Fane. The scenery of the island was still coming into focus, but Kaya had no time to catch her breath. A feeling of tragedy had risen in her heart, and that was the light that guided her back to Gaia. "Something's happened to my father," said Kaya. "Fane, what's going on?" Fane's face fell, and Kaya knew that her gut instincts had been correct. Something was very wrong on Monhegan Island. "Jasper's sick," said Fane. "He was poisoned by the hydrovine, and Miss Clara is taking him to the capital for healing." "Is he going to be okay?" Fane didn't answer, and Kaya knew at once that there was no answer. Fane and Kaya hid back in Cathedral Woods so that they could talk privately. He filled her in on everything that had happened, speaking only loud enough for Kaya to hear over the sounds of croaking frogs and buzzing insects. "I'm sorry, Kaya," said Fane. "If I would have known that it wasn't you, I would have never let her get near Gull Cove." "I can't believe that father left without me," said Kaya. "What if he dies? How could Marin just sit here and let them go?" "She's not like you at all. Marin didn't hit me in the head with a rock once when she was here. It might be the brain damage speaking, but I've missed you, Kaya." Kaya knew that her feelings were irrational, but a white-hot sensation of anger at the city girl burned inside of her. Marin had spent her life staring at glowing screens at the top of her silver tower, and only one day on Monhegan was all it took for her to throw Kaya's life into shambles. "We can't let them go without us," said Kaya. "I have to be there if... She broke off, not being able to summon the courage to finish the sentence. Fane looked at her, nodding with a mischievous shine in his eyes. "There's my Kaya," he said. "I'm sure that Jasper would have taken you if Marin hadn't been stuck inside your head. How about we make a trip to the mainland?" Kaya and Fane hid in the trees, watching as several Monhegans cleaned the sailboats on the harbor. "I wish I could teleport," said Fane. "We're going to need one of those boats to make it to the mainland." "Surely my father told everyone to be on the lookout," said Kaya. "He must have known that you would try something like this." "Yes, it is a Tuesday, and I usually do something stupid on Tuesdays. We'll need some sort of a distraction, but they'll probably be expecting one from me. It has to be believable." Kaya began shouting, trying her best to disguise her voice. "Fate set the village on fire again!" she yelled. "We need all of the relayers at once!" The Monhegans standing guard ran towards the village at breakneck speed. Fane gave Kaya a delighted smile, and the two of them snuck onto a small sailboat at the end of the dock. Fane untied the ropes and released the sails. "The winds aren't in our favor tonight," he said. "I'll have to be careful." "What's the worst that could happen?" asked Kaya.
"I blow us out to sea and we're lost there forever? Doesn't sound so bad to me." Fane blushed. He held up his arms and an enormous gust of wind pushed the boat forward.
In very little time, the docks were rapidly receding in the distance behind them. Kaya stood up, feeling the cold wind on her face. In spite of all that had happened, she felt a tiny thrill at their escape. Pretty soon, she would be further from Monhegan than she had ever been in her life, other than her day spent on Earth. "Thank you for doing this with me," she said.
"Heck, I've been wanting to go back to the mainland for cycles," he replied.
"I've got some unfinished business there, but mostly I'm worried about your father. I feel so bad that I couldn't save Maren from the vines myself. I didn't think that anything could ever hurt Jasper." "Me neither," said Kaya. Kaya had felt angry at Maren, but seeing Fane's guilt made her realize something. For so long, Kaya worried that she would never connect with Gaia and discover her relaying powers. But the moment she had, it turned out to be more of a curse than a gift. If this was anybody's fault, it was hers. The capital. A week earlier, Jonathan York was working on his latest atrocity. Floating blobs of color rotated around the painter. He moved his hand very delicately, and two of the droplets merged into one another, creating a dull shade of yellow. He concentrated, flicked one of his fingers, and the color brightened. Jonathan relayed the paint towards his canvas and began brushing the hair on High Guardian Thomas's head. His dumb, fat head. Jonathan York was the most well-renowned painter in all of Edgardia and had the prestigious job as the Guardianship's resident artist. Jonathan had painted his employer thousands of times. At this point, he painted the portraits entirely from memory. Images of High Guardian Thomas the Mentalist hung in every hallway of the capital and were teleported all around the world to wealthy families. Jonathan was currently painting Thomas riding into battle on the back of a flying stallion, holding a spear into the air triumphantly while his long, blonde hair blew in the wind. He made sure to shed roughly 40 pounds from the royal gut with his brushstrokes. What a joke this painting was. No, Jonathan corrected himself. What a joke my career is. High Guardian Thomas Zieg had been one of Edgard's 7 knights, blessed with a small amount of the Son of Gaia's power. He was the only survivor from Duncan Casey's massacre that killed the late High Guardian and the other 6 knights. Thomas had successfully managed to keep fractions of the guardianship together in a time of great turmoil. But that was long ago. Now Thomas was a fat man with a wispy comb-over. He spent most of his days eating, gambling with tax money, dating suspiciously young women, and admiring his own portraits while his advisors ran the guardianship. Jonathan had once asked the High Guardian if his daughter could come live in the capital with him. "No, I really don't think so, Thomas had said without hesitation between bites of puff pastry. I'm afraid that the capital is at capacity right now, and people are knocking at the walls to get in. How about I start to pay you double and you can send the extra money to your daughter? Of course, Jonathan had accepted. The amount of money he made was absolutely absurd for an artist, and he dreamed that once he amassed his fortune, he would retire and go off to live with his daughter and grandchild. More than anything, he just wanted to stop staring at the High Guardian's face day in and day out. A messenger suddenly burst through the door of Jonathan's studio, panting for breath. "Sir Jonathan," said the messenger, "your daughter is waiting for you outside the gates of the capital. She says it is urgent. It is about your grandchild." "What?" cried Jonathan, his heart racing in his chest. He lowered his hands and the floating blobs of paint returned to the palette. "Take me to her at once." The messenger escorted him outside the capital's outer walls. Jonathan resented the fact that they wouldn't even let his own daughter inside, if only for a brief moment. A woman waited for him on one of the many pathways that led to the outer gates. She wore a thick jacket and hood to protect her from the wind. The messenger left Jonathan alone with his daughter so they could speak privately. "Has something happened to Rose?" asked Jonathan. The woman removed her hood, and Jonathan became very confused. Whoever this woman was, it was not his daughter. She had long dark hair tied behind her back, and her face was decorated with ornate floral tattoos. A black streak of tattooed fire traced its way up her neck and onto her cheeks. Jonathan gasped, recognizing the insignia of the Western Blaze. "Nomad!" he cried. "Oh, Father," the woman said, "you must be confused. Come with me." Jonathan turned to flee, but the woman had already placed a hand on his back. There was an abrupt pop as the two of them vanished, and oxygen rushed to fill in the gap they had left in the air. The wind was blowing very hard in the Guardian ship that night, and none of the guards had heard the sound of teleportation. A new resident artist was hired within days, and it was believed that Jonathan's granddaughter had suddenly fallen ill. Nobody in the capital suspected that there were currently events happening outside the outer walls which would change Gaia forever. The Atlas Ocean. Fane found a map of northeast Edgardia in the sailboat and quickly discovered that the nearest telestation was 24 stretches down the coast. They decided that it would be much safer to travel on water than to face the unknowns of the mainland, so they followed the shoreline in the sailboat. Kaya and Fane took turns watching the sails while the others slept. During her shift, Kaya watched the morning sun rise and realized that she was now entering the second day of her 14th cycle. When it was Fane's turn, Kaya woke him up and the two of them sat for a while talking about the previous day. "Have you tried relaying again since you returned?" asked Fane, and Kaya got an embarrassed look on her face. "Yes," she admitted. "I feel the power of Gaia now, but every time I start to take it in, I hear the sounds of machinery. I'm afraid that if I try too much, I will switch places with Marin again. My powers are pretty useless." "Oh, I don't know," said Fane. "I can do many things with my relaying abilities, but they are all things that a lot of other people can do. We're heading towards the Edgardian capital, and there will be thousands of conjurous relayers there who are much stronger than I am in every way. The knight Will Zieg lives there. Freaking Will Zieg. That dude can melt internalist steel with his mind. But Kaya, I've never heard of someone doing what you've done. I think that's pretty amazing." Kaya found herself blushing. Usually people talked about how extraordinary Fane's abilities were, and he had developed a big head about it. Fane never gave out compliments like this, yet Kaya still wasn't sure how her relaying could be very helpful. Marin had done quite a bit of damage during her day on Gaia, whether purposeful or not, and it was Kaya's fault that they switched places. "I'll take the last leg of the trip," said Vane, standing up and relaying the wind towards the sail. "You go ahead and rest. I'll get us safely to the telestation." Kaya awoke to hear Fane shouting obscenities, and upon opening her eyes, she saw that the sails of the boat were ablaze. Fane sprayed ocean water at the flames in desperation, but they seemed to be resisting the water and were gradually spreading to the deck of the boat. "What's happening?" asked Kaya. "Were we attacked by nomads?" "Nope," said Fane, relaying a cloud of mist which engulfed the flames to no avail. She expected him to continue, but he remained tight-lipped. "Were we attacked at all?" asked Kaya. "Nope." "You were playing with fire, weren't you?" "Well, that's just gonna remain a mystery." Fane summoned a great big wave which crashed over the flames, successfully extinguishing the burning deck. However, the entire sailboat was now filled to the brim with water, and they began sinking into the ocean. Fane sighed, looking to the shore and estimating the amount of energy it would take to get there. "Well, land travel it is then," he said. "Take my hand." Kaya gripped Fane's hand and they jumped into the waters of the ocean together. The moment they hit the waves, a burst of water pressure catapulted them across the surface, their feet sliding across the water. "I've been working on this technique for a while," Fane shouted over the roar of the water. "I wasn't sure if it would work with two people. Glad you're here." He looked at her, hair whipping in the wind, and gave Kaya a delighted smile. Within minutes, they had arrived on the rocky shores of the mainland. Kaya climbed up onto a large boulder and peered at the forest that scattered the land ahead of them. She thought about how if they traveled through the forest, they would not reach the other end of the continent for thousands of stretches. Her arms broke out in goosebumps. "This is it," she observed. "We're actually in mainland Edgardia. This is where Miss Claire was born and Edgard Zieg ended the Gaian global war. This is where everything happens," said Fane. Early that morning, Jasper and Clara Monhegan sat in a small cafe in the town of Boothbay. It was the closest stop to the Portland telestation, so it was bustling with travelers coming and going. A waitress walked by their table bringing a slice of cake to another patron. Jasper's gloomy attitude suddenly perked up, and he signaled to the young woman. "You have cake?" asked Jasper. "Yes. Blueberry with lemon buttercream." Jasper slammed his fist down onto the table and smiled for the first time that day. "Cancel my eggs, please," he declared, "and bring me 4 slices of cake with a pot of black coffee." Clara raised an eyebrow at her guardian. "What?" asked Jasper. "I eat fish day in and day out, and there's never any good dessert on Monhegan. I thought about learning how to bake myself just to put an end to the culinary monotony." He sniffed. "Oh, Gaia, I can smell it already." "That's it. If I survive this, I'm becoming a pastry chef. You'll have to find a new guardian." "Same eating habits since you were a little boy," laughed Clara. "Who would have thought? The mighty guardian of Monhegan has a soft spot for sugar." "There's nothing wrong with a grown man enjoying," Jasper began, but was cut short by the sound of breaking glass. The waitress had dropped her tray and was looking out of the window in horror. "The nomads are back," she said in a hushed voice, and the entire room broke out into a panic. Several mothers cried and held their children close. Grown men paced worriedly and argued amongst themselves. "What's going on?" asked Clara to an old man at the table next to them. "The nomads have been showing up every couple of weeks," he whispered quickly. "They ask for people to volunteer to come with them, but no one knows why. Most people think that the nomads use them as slaves. If nobody volunteers to go, the savages burn down houses and take twice the amount of people. Someone always volunteers now. Gaia bless them." What about your guardian? Asked Jasper. Haven't they tried to stop it? The first time the nomads showed up, we refused, and they killed our guardian. We've been trying to contact the capital to tell them, but there's been no response. Most of the villagers have just been moving away. This town will die soon, and mark my words, Portland will be next. If the telestation goes away, people will have to travel over 200 stretches to get to the next closest one in Hampshire. Maybe that's what they want, to spread chaos. Jasper gave an intense stare to Clara. Jasper, she whispered, reading his thoughts, we can't intervene. You are sick. We don't want to attract attention. A young man, no older than 17 cycles, suddenly stood up and said, I'll go, in a trembling voice. The young woman next to him began wailing, grabbing him by the shirt and begging him to stay inside. Jasper and Clara looked at each other again. Is it even a question? Whispered Jasper. Would you like to just sit and watch? Clara shook her head slowly. You know that's never been an option for me. He nodded his head and smiled. Stop! Shouted Jasper, standing up. Nobody is volunteering, and I'm going to need my cake to go. He grabbed a piece of cake from the nearest cart and began eating it as he and Clara left the cafe. The nomad stood in the middle of the empty street, waiting for his volunteer to come out and be taken. He held a long spear, and his entire body was covered in black, ornate tattoos of fire. The man watched the sky, eyeing the large, dark clouds which were rolling in seemingly from nowhere. Clara and Jasper approached him, and immediately the nomad vanished before reappearing inches in front of Clara's face. We have no need for a weak old woman, sneered the man, prodding Clara with the back end of his spear. Go back inside, you pathetic. Uh-oh, mumbled Jasper, his mouth full of cake. Clara swatted the spear out of the nomad's grip, held her walking stick high, and brought it crashing down upon the ground. A thunderous boom rang out for stretches, as if the planet itself were resonating from the impact. Windows shook at neighboring villages up and down the coast. The nomad stumbled and held his hands over his ears, yelling in pain. An all-encompassing screeching sound filled his head as his eardrums reeled from impact. The people of Boothbay all began to stumble outside or look out their windows, marveling over the fact that from one horizon to another, the world appeared to be trembling.
This is the author. If you'd like to keep up to date about my books, take a look at my social media links in the video description. As always, thanks for listening, and make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss part 3 when it comes out.